from School of Historical Swordsmanship Models, and I'm here to make a very quick and improper comparison of a few swords which we have in stock, and to discuss the Sigi King, which is the new type of sword that we are hoping to get as a standard school sword. And not only the King, but also other Sigi products. So the original sword which we've worked with is Regenyei standard longsword. This is my relatively old Regenyei sword. As you can see, it's seen a lot of work. Come over here and show it to the camera. As you can see, it's been a while for that sword. You can see the nicks, and here it's frayed on the handle. Need to really clean it up a bit. So this is what we've been using as standard for quite a while now. Besides this, we have the Albion here. This is the Albion sword which we have. It's a blunt. And for comparison's sake, I also taken out a standard Regenyei feather. Now this is the Sigi short. I'll explain why we're using the short in a short while. So in terms of measurements, you can see the comparison pretty accurate here. So the Regenyei and the Albion, they're almost the same, with the King being a bit longer, and of course the feather being even longer than that. If the King was a standard King, it would have been the same size as the feather. In terms of length, you can see that actually this guard here of the King is 28 centimeters, whereas the Regenyei has a much shorter guard at 24. Comparatively, 23 at the Albion, and here it is 25. Actually, the feather, even though it's a bigger sword than the King, has a shorter crossguard. So in terms of the other details, the King you can probably check out from the Sigi page, but that's the shorty version. Point of balance was at about 5 centimeters. You can see where the point of balance is. It's close. Point of balance on the Regenyei is roughly here. Maybe around this point. Since, as I was saying, impromptu, so this is probably not the best way to measure point of balance, but yeah, roughly at here. The point of balance of the Albion is well, pretty higher, pretty much higher than the Regenyei. So here, and the point of balance on the King, it's here-ish. So somewhere in the middle between the Regenyei and the Albion, I would say. And of course, when we're talking about feathers, because of the shield, the point of balance will be quite weird compared to the other ones. Around here-ish, you can feel it tipping slightly. And then around here. So, as you can see, it's a bit of a longer sword with very large crossguard compared to the others. If you take the mini version, I think it will be slightly shorter than the Albion. And I took out the Albion and the Regenyei and the feather because you can see that this sword kind of tries to combine them. So the Albion definitely has been a design inspiration. You can see the similarities there on the crossguard. You can see the similarities with the pommel. That's the default pommel of the Sigi. That's the default pommel of the Albion. And there the similarities kind of end because the Sigi has two fullers, whereas the Albion has one very wide fuller, especially in this area, towards the top. Now, however, this one looks quite close to the Albion, quite close to the Regenyei, but behaves in a way closer to the feather without the downside or upside. It's a bit in the balance without the added benefits and drawbacks of the shield over here. So what do I mean by that? You can see the evolution of the tip, so to speak. Here with the Regenyei we have a fairly narrow tip, which can be problematic in the stab. The Albion is a stiffer blade, but it has a wider tip, which is safer. The same applies here to the feather actually, which is also wide tipped. This, the King, is interesting, as the Sigi swords are. Actually, all of them, I think, have that spatulated tip, which is pretty safe in thrust. Talking about thrusting, let me show you why the King is so great at the as a training sword. So that's the Regenyei. You can see the flex, how much it does it. And we stop. That's the amount of flex. And I suppose it would be more obvious if I started sideways. That's the amount of flex which you get on the Regenyei, and I'm pushing pretty hard here. It's a relatively stiff blade and it's kind of forgiving as well. So if you hit it like that, kind of not very well on the side or there, it will still catch. That's because it's not very flexible. It's pretty rigid. Has a narrow edge. So moving on to the Albion, features the same relatively narrow edge, but the tip is wider and it has the wide fuller as well. So fullers, surprisingly, they tend to make things more rigid. So you can see that sometimes there's no flex at all with the Albion. That's why, well, the Albion is great in terms of a historical simulator. It's not so good in terms of a training sword when you want to stab someone hard, because it will hurt eventually. And to do the flex here, pushing roughly the same strength as the Regenyei, you can see that it's bending less. And it will be forgiving in the cuts as well. I'll leave the Sigi for last, because after all that's the point of the video. The feather. The feather, much narrower here, so of course it will bend more. Let's see. Actually, even this feather, it doesn't bend that much, but it's still more than the other two. So the benefit of the feather is that it's lighter and it's more flexible. Again, this one has a wider edge, but it's still very forgiving with cuts which are kind of glancing. It still catches, sort of, because it still has a bit of that rigidity. And actually I was a bit surprised. I expected it to be more flexible, because when we're talking about the Sigi, because of the double fuller design, as well as because of the material, I suppose. I am not a materials expert, unfortunately. You can see how much it bends. And it bends, and it bends, and it bends. It stabs the tires, it bends, it bends, and it does bend. So you can see, again, you just press here on the side, there's much bigger bend. I can actually arch it that way, make it more obvious, or this way. Much bigger bend. Of course, this means that in the bind, and when you're hitting someone, it's also less forgiving. So if you're hitting something kind of flat-ish, it's very likely to just bounce off and not catch. Again, because it's not rigid. Another benefit, this one, I've had it for about a month. It's seen some heavy usage, but you can see I've actually never worked it with sandpaper or with a file. There's basically no damage. And this is probably not because I'm a great fencer, because I'm not, but because of the materials used. Because, again, it's a very well designed sword, I would say, and it's great for what it's trying to do, and it's trying to be a fencing tool for teaching and for learning, and for that it's an amazing sword. And the same applies for the other products on the Sigi line. I'm sure, even though I haven't tried most of them, I do have a Sigi Junior. The Sigi Junior, I can tell you the same, it's also very flexible. a bit less stable in the bind. The Sigi Junior is more nimble, and I'm going to assume that the same comparison can be done between the Sigi King and the Sigi Shieldless sword, and the Sigi Queen and the Sigi Junior. So I'm going to assume that the same comparison applies there. The one with the two fullers, like the King here, it's going to be more presence in the bind. The one with the the one without fullers, actually, the shieldless sword, probably less presence in the bind, but more faster, flexible. And the same probably applies for the Queen and Junior. The spatulated tip prevents stabbing, but actually on the Junior it's a bit too pronounced. So on the short swords, which I could show you, just hold on here a moment. Bring the short sword. On the King, I have no issue with the tip. On the Junior, the spatulation is a bit much. It can be taken very slightly off here. And it's actually what's happened on the Queen, judging from the photos. The Queen doesn't have that very spatulated tip. So again, same flexibility. I'm not going to stab the floor, I'm going to stab myself. The floor is more expensive than my foot, in a way. The foot will heal, something goes bad. But yeah, same flexibility as the King. Overall, great swords. This one is kind of the budget version. So the Queen is probably the nicer version, definitely. That's the budget. That's the nicer, more expensive version there with the King. And the budget version would be either the Sigi concept, actually, because the concept is like a feather but without the shields. It's kind of wider here and then gets narrower. That's pretty good. Or the Sigi sword, which is the version of the Junior, which is hand and a half. Okay, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure. Radostin here from School of Historical Swordsmanship, Motus in Bulgaria. Thanks.